Okay, welcome again. Glad you could all join us for our first GIS user group, NG911 GIS user group for 2026. So like I said, I hope everyone's having a nice beginning to spring. Let's see here. So we tend to have these meetings every quarter, and we try to keep on track with that. We really do set dates throughout the year and have them penciled in, but don't send them out for the whole year yet because they are subject to change depending on, if someone becomes unavailable. So I try to send it out with enough warning for everyone. And so as soon as we settle on our meeting date for the second quarter, I will get that sent out as well. Okay, we're going to follow our usual format today with just a little bit of a change. So I'll start things off. We'll give you some general kind of program updates. Talk a little bit in detail about the critical facility mapping project, and Alan Schaefer is going to join me on that. I need to introduce Alan Schaefer. So when we get there, I'll kind of talk a little bit more Alan's role and introduce Alan to the group. So he's part of the DASK team and had previously worked on Crash Mapper, but he's pulled in more into the 911 side of things. So he's helping us, especially with there's a never-ending need for data review and work on 911. So we appreciate that he's able to join us for that. So he's going to help me talk about that project and sort of specifically the technical QA portion. Then I'll hand it over to Will, who will talk about the latest and greatest with the 911 toolbox. And then to close things out, we'll hand it off to Sherry, who will provide some updates on more national topics like NENA. Okay, I've been kind of keeping this slide in all my presentations just to remind everyone what the State 911 Board's hosted solution is and what it covers, at least the geography of it. So as a reminder, all of the counties, or the PSAPs, I should say, in blue are part of the 911 Board's hosted solution. And then all the PSAPs in gray are part of the Mid-America Regional Council, or MARC, Kansas City region hosted solution. But even though the blue counties use a specific call handling and call handling mapping software, they're across the state, and MARC uses their own, we still have data submitted statewide for MARC PSAPs and hosted solution PSAPs to aggregate together to support 911 call handling across the state. So I just think this is a nice way to kind of remind everyone that it's almost statewide. The MARC region also submits their data. And then there's that weird little county there, it looks like in Oklahoma. So Coffeyville, Kansas PSAP supports call handling in Nowata County, Oklahoma. So they don't receive any funding or anything of that nature from the Kansas 911 board, but their vendor does submit data to us to aggregate together so that it appears in the Coffeyville PSAP call handling mapping system so they can answer 911 calls for that area. So that's what we have that. Apparently it's we all know about rural Kansas, right? It's an extremely rural area. So yeah, that mutual agreement with Coffeyville works out nicely for that area. Okay, so just a few updates. There really isn't going to be any change to the 911 program portal, except for there will be a minor tweak to its web address. So due to certain security things and SSL certificates and all sorts of fun security protocol things, there will be a minor change to the portal's web address. So I have it in the slide here, the current address, which still is the current one that's working, is just portal.kansasgs.org. That will change on April 6th to 911portal.kansasgs.org. You shouldn't have to do anything. It should be kind of behind the scenes and redirect you to the new page. But kind of wanted to just make sure everyone was aware that if you log in, it redirects you and you see that and you're like, oh, what's going on? That is on purpose. So it's just a minor tweak in the address. So if you feel free to update your bookmarks and things like that after April 6th. But there will be no other changes besides that. It literally is just the web URL is changing slightly to accommodate, like I said, those different requirements and security things behind the scenes. So if you have any questions about that, feel free always to reach out to me and I'd be happy to answer them for you. So another thing's going on. So the 2024 Kansas 911 imagery is fully out there, thank goodness. So you can download the Mr. Sid files in the 24K USGS quads. We also have the public dynamic service released, as well as a dedicated tile cache that's integrated into the call handling map for 911. This one, releasing the public dynamic service, unfortunately took us a lot longer than we'd hoped this time. I think I've told you all, anyone who's contacted me, I've told them, we're in the middle of a big move to Azure, moving everything to Enterprise Portal in the cloud. Well, just as soon as you think things are easy and we've got it set up, then we're under the University of Kansas IT umbrella. Then they like to make some changes, and things were shifting enough that we're still working in that direction, but we went ahead and published the service on-prem, which we're trying to get away from, just to fill that gap until we had the Azure Enterprise Portal integration or enterprise installation fully up, operational, the services optimized and working the way we wanted them to. So eventually there will be a shift in the imagery URLs, and we'll have a huge outreach campaign, notifications, and services won't just go away, right away. There'll be a phased out grace period for that. But hopefully in the next few months, we'll be starting to send out more information about that and make announcements with that regard. So again, we won't suddenly take something away from you or change something or shift something, but know that we are actively working on moving to the cloud, which will be better. We just got to make sure everything's set up correctly for that move. Okay, then what's next for imagery? So we are making plans for the next acquisition, which would be in 2027. So the contract with Surdex, who is now Bowman, is coming into completion. So we'll need to put out a new imagery acquisition RFP for this collection. We plan on having the RFP released probably early summer of this year, with the hope of then being able to select a vendor and have them acquire imagery again winter of 2027, which would be starting in February through April of next year. We hope to include all the other great stuff that was in the last acquisitions, including local buy-up. We're even looking at including wording in the RFP to say, well, what would pricing be for 1 foot or 6 inch? Because I'm sure, as you all know, sensors continue to get better. Acquisition methods are improving and being more efficient. So, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for Sherry and the budget for the 911 board, but we're kind of hoping if we could get some cost sharing, there might be a chance we could at least consider 6 inch statewide, which would be pretty amazing. So a lot more to come on that once we get the RFP completed, released, and start looking at vendors and reviewing bids. So that's why I have the NG911 GIS committee on there, because we'll be reactivating that group. For those of you on the call that are on the committee, you know who you are. So once we get to the point where we're ready to talk about the RFP, get it released, and start reviewing bids, we'll be asking that committee if you can commit to participating in that effort. So the great thing is the 911 board is committed to continuing to acquire and support the majority of the funding needed to get imagery every 3 years for these 3-year renewals. And we greatly appreciate that and do everything we can here at DAS to support those efforts. And thank everyone out there that has helped us QA all this imagery we've gotten every 3 years. Okay, so that's it for imagery. So another update I wanted to give you, this is just a partnership. So there was not really anything, this isn't data that DAS gets or anything, but through the Kansas 911 board, Kansas Department of Transportation, Rapid Deploy, which of course is the call handling mapping for the 911 centers, they have a partnership with Skyline and KDOT to integrate the KDOT traffic cameras into the 911 maps. So I think this is really exciting. It'll be a continuous live traffic camera feed, and these are actually the 911 cameras you see on CAN Drive. And through this partnership with Skyline, who is able to manage the technology to allow this to happen, now telecommunicators across the state once this is deployed statewide, which will be in the next week or so, we'll have nice little traffic camera icons where they can click on to actually see these camera feeds in their 911 call handling map. So again, this isn't data we handle. It's just a service that plugs directly into Radius as they work with Rapid Deploy. But I thought it was just a nice thing to let you all know that if you happen to stop by your PSAP, which I encourage you all to do whenever you get a chance, it'd be neat to see these in action, to see if there is an emergency and the call handlers do need to access a traffic camera to see what's going on the road or what's happening nearby. It's a nice new integration into the mapping system. So just kind of a quick update on that. Okay. Okay, so moving on to kind of the hot topic right now. So as you all know, we are in the middle of this critical facilities mapping project or grant, which is essentially gathering data for indoor mapping for critical facilities. So about this time last year, Sherry was notified that the legislation had allocated $2 million for the statewide initiative that was to focus on K through 12 schools, but other critical facilities were also identified with this. So I included the list of facilities in the order of priority with which we were supposed to respect when people applied for grant funds to get their facilities mapped. So we went through, this is such an abbreviated update on this, went through the whole process, got an RFP, selected, narrowed it down to a qualified vendor list. So real similar, if you all remember, to the GIS remediation project, where we didn't want to select a single vendor for you. We wanted to give you a qualified vendor list, a short one, that you could then select who you wanted to do your indoor mapping for you. In this case, that was the PSAP making that selection. So we narrowed it down to a qualified vendor list of 3 companies. And then from there, the PSAPs that had applied, the money or the grant money has been awarded in kind of a round robin award process. With it being, we're on such a strict timeline, we really had to kind of go in the order of grant applications as they're received. So going through and awarding as many as possible, but kind of adhering to the first come, first serve kind of qualification for getting funds allocated until the $2 million is fully spent. So one important thing to know about this is, again, to apply to get this indoor mapping done, it required a collaborative relationship between the PSAP and the schools. So the PSAP had to have had set up a relationship with each school, or at least the school district for the schools, along with a current point of contact for each individual school before they could even apply for these funds. So this really was a funding opportunity for PSAPs to work with their schools, or the other facilities I mentioned, work with those facility contacts to acquire funding to get their facilities mapped. They submitted those applications through, of course, to the Kansas 911 portal. And once their application is approved, so let's say, for example, I'm in a certain PSAP and I'm like, okay, I've got 10 schools I want mapped, and I get those submitted. As funding comes through, you might get all 10 approved right away, or 5, however the funding works out. But at that time, the PSAP selects a vendor, and they select one vendor to map whatever facilities are approved for their PSAP area. From this is being produced authoritative maps that'll be provided to the schools and first responders with things like just everything you would think is going to be on an indoor map. Entrances, room outlines, room identifiers, special points of interest, like, where's the AED devices those are a special gas shut-off valve here everyone needs to know about, things like that. So any hazards or specific points of interest that were called out by the PSAPs as being needed as part of the indoor mapping project. So at this point, 443 facilities have been approved, crossing 47 PSAPs so far. I think we're at over 600 facilities have actually applied. So kind of waiting to see if we're at the end of the 2 million or future funding will be allocated, but have really gotten a lot of facilities approved and are underway in getting their facilities mapped. So with that, what will they get? So we tried to be really careful in the RFP to make sure GIS data is a requirement for any of this indoor mapping efforts. So the PSAP and facility will get a file geodatabase with the feature classes of all the items listed there. They'll also get complete maps, including PDFs in GeoTIFF format, meaning they even could have a map that if they wanted to print it out, they'd be able to print out a map to take in the field. One important point is that the way this funding was allocated, it does not cover maintenance. So this is just to get the initial mapping done for the facility or for the organization. And then after that, it's just an option for the local PSAP or schools to purchase a maintenance option. So we do recognize how important it is to maintain data, because once you maintain it, right, as soon as the next day it's already outdated. But this particular funding is just for that initial mapping effort. And then they get also, if there's anything else their particular vendor offers, you know, throughout this process, there was a lot of outreach, especially talking to the PSAPs to talk to their schools. And then once the vendors list was selected, they also went out and talked to a lot of PSAPs about what they could offer to help the PSAPs decide who to choose. So there could be things beyond the requirements that they offer to the PSAPs depending on the vendor. And then the big thing is eventually this indoor data will be integrated into the call handling maps, the Radius, which is in the PSAP, and the Lightning mobile application, which is used by first responders across the state. Okay, from that, this is where I'm going to hand it off to Alan, who I mentioned is our new addition to the DASC 911 team. And he is really our main point of contact in doing the technical review for the critical facilities mapping project. So Alan, I will hand it off to you for these slides.
All right. Thanks, Eileen. Like Eileen said, my name is Alan Schaefer, and work with DASC, and I'm joining this project for the QA technical review. And usually the first question that comes up is like, why do we even have a formal review process? And I think, as Eileen mentioned, there's a lot of data from hundreds of facilities that are all being generated during this project, and it's being done during a pretty compressed time frame. I mean, really, this has been a year or so. So we want to make sure that all the maps, the GIS data, you know, the integration into Radius and Lightning, that all of that is done with accurate, high quality, complete data. And what we're using kind of as our guiding force is adherence to the RFP and adherence to the contract documents. And so that way everybody knows that once this has been approved, that the data should be complete. It should be usable, valuable data. And something that one of the things we wanted to make sure as a part of this project is if we're doing all these site visits and all this data collection, that it's usable hopefully in the future as well. So that's where the requesting GIS data and requesting elevation and floor aware data, hopefully in the future, that'll also be valuable for projects down the line. Next slide. And so because of the scale of the project and the different skill sets of everybody involved, we have 3 different checkpoints in the quality assurance process. So the initial sign-off we're requiring from a school or facility representative, which, if you think about it, really a school rep or a facility representative, you know, they own the buildings, they'll own the data. They know their schools better than anybody else. So that we felt that it was important that they're involved and they sign off and they say, yeah, the fire extinguishers and locker rooms are all in the places that they need to be. And then once that happens, then we step in at DASC. And really what our goal is to make sure that all the technical requirements from the RFP and the contract are met. We want to make sure that the GIS data is complete and in the formats and projections and everything that we request, so that it's usable, valuable data for everybody involved. We want to make sure that the GeoTIFFs and the PDFs, that they function as map documents, and also that they function that we can use them in radius and lightning. Because really, if we can't use it in the hosted solution, if the maps aren't usable, if the GIS data isn't complete, then we're not doing our jobs here. And we want to make sure that we're getting a good value for the dollar. And then so after we sign off and approve on it, then it goes back to the PSAP, and the PSAP has to make the final sign off before any kind of payment's made. And so hopefully once that circle's been completed, everybody's had eyes on it, and we have a good, complete, useful set of maps and set of data for the over 400 plus facilities that have already joined this grant. Next slide. And just a little bit here on kind of how we document our step of the process, and also a little bit of lessons learned. The plane hasn't really taken off. It's still taxiing, but we're already learning a few lessons on and a few tweaks on how we review our data. Initially, we made an internal survey 123 form. I'm sure a lot of you folks have used it before. It's very quick, it's very handy, and you can access the data in a lot of powerful ways later and pull it out. And once the data came in, we found that we still intend on using the survey 123 form, but some of our initial data required a little more comprehensive review. And in order to ensure that we're getting the changes we need from the vendors, we've kind of reverted to a more long form document, highlighting the challenges that we're seeing in some of the data. And as far as lessons learned, that would definitely be one. Another one, and for the GIS pros that are on this call, if your school district or your PSAP administrator contact you and want an extra set of eyes on the data or on the maps, my ask would be that please take a nice detailed look at it. You know, everybody involved is only human, and we're still kind of working through some of the kinks in the data deliverables. And this is really the time when it's fresh in the vendors' minds, and more importantly, they haven't been paid. That if there are issues with the data, if it's not complete, if it's not accurate, if there's something that everyone else has overlooked, you know, raise your hand and say something about it now, because it'll be much easier to correct it now than 6 months or a year or 5 years down the line. So, and that's all I have. I think we're going to hand it back to Eileen to talk about next steps in the program.
Great. Well, thanks, Alan, for that. And I think one of the other lessons learned here is this indoor data is new to us too. You know, at DASC, we're not doing a lot of indoor mapping, right? So we're getting familiar with the symbology and the polygons and just the whole technique and how the data is used and can be interacted with. So we're all kind of learning along this process. So as Alan said, the technical queue has just begun. So we've just received, I think, 5 facilities so far. So I told you we have 443. So we have a lot more of data coming in. With the timeline, how it worked out, one of the requirements was that the vendors had to do an on-site visit. So it took some time to get that scheduled with the schools, tried to do that over the holiday break. And then as different breaks in school have come up. So that's why that took a lot of effort to get up and running to even get the vendors to the schools to visit to be able to do the indoor mapping. So just started receiving some data. We're thinking that, you know, the floodgate is just cracked open, and pretty soon we're going to start getting just tons of data. So this has been a nice getting familiar phase, so we can make sure we've got our technical QA process down before all the data shows up. So we're also working with Rapid Deploy to kind of finalize how this data will be integrated into Radius and Lightning. The idea is that when you're in those applications, if you're at a place where that has a facility mapped, there'll be a way to zoom into it and interact with it with a floor picker. So we've tested that. There's just a lot of little details to work out on, like hosting the service, configuring the data. You know, there's just always those behind the scenes things we got to work on. So we're conceptually talked about it and seen kind of the interface of how to work, but just need to kind of tighten up all the configuration details on that. There may be future funding. Like I said, I hate to say we didn't ask for this, but the money kind of came our way, and we kind of had to rush and put this project together. So there's rumors that, well, there's no budget set yet, but there's rumors that there might be additional funding allocated or earmarked, or however you want to say it, for this for next year. So we set up the vendor contracts in a way that it could be a multi-year, even renewable effort. So we think we're kind of set and ready for and prepared for any additional funding that might come our way. We're also doing our best to encourage the facilities that get mapped to consider a maintenance package. Make sure you keep an eye on the data. You know, just those discussions are ongoing. There's not funding for that, but I think once people start seeing the data, right, you expect it to be updated and accurate, and it's great that we get the telecommunicators often will tell us when there's a problem with the data. So I think that'll be kind of a next phase of making sure people understand the importance of maintenance as well. So here's my little plug too. I hope some of you will be going to the 2026 Mid-America GIS Magic Symposium in Omaha, April 14th through 16th, here in just, what, 2 or 3 weeks. Alan and I will be giving an even longer version of this, talking through the agreements, more the technical QA, the funding, and more. Like, we could have talked for a couple hours on this, but we tried to give you an abbreviated version. So if you're going to Magic, please come find Alan and I and come to our session. We'd love to see you. Okay, so before we move on to Will, I'm going to check the chat. Are there any questions, or does anyone want to unmute and have any questions on the critical facilities mapping project before we move on to Toolbox? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in chat or anyone. So, okay, I will hand it off to Will Trimble, who is our 911 GIS developer, to talk about the Toolbox.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Always nice to have everybody here for a short get together. Oh, gonna look at Sarah Lynn had a question here.
Let's see here. Okay, thank you for catching that. Do you have a map or image of the areas that were approved? You know, Sarah Lynn, that's funny. We were just talking about how we needed to make one of those. You know, we're the GIS people. That makes sense, right? Al and I were just talking about that. So soon we will, because like I mentioned, it's, you know, whatever, 47 different PSAPs. So it'd be interesting to know who exactly has been approved at this point. So we're going to work on that. We'll have that to show definitely next quarter for you.
Actually, I have one.
Oh, of course Sherry has one. Oh, show off.
Right. I put one together for the legislators to talk to them about the progress of the project. So I will dig it out and show it before the end of the call. Maybe during my my presentation, I'll show it.
Perfect. Okay, great. I should have known Sherry was one step ahead of us, of course. Okay. Any other questions? Put them in the chat, but we'll hand it off to Will now.
Great. All right, thanks. I have a few updates, some of them that Eileen already touched on a little bit, but I just broke it down into kind of 3 categories, and then we'll touch on it a little bit in the second slide. But there's been a lot of coding, updating changes on our end, and then I'm on one side in the end of 2025 and the start of 2026. Like Eileen mentioned, we're doing a big infrastructure update, so we're taking our data from on-premise to the cloud and moving everything associated with it to the cloud as well. So a lot of that is coding and processing, scripting and updating that has to do with the 911 toolbox. It also relates to the portal, taking your data from the portal and processing that into the statewide database, taking that statewide database, preparing that data, sending it on to Entrado for UGMS and other things in a system with our other partners. So we've just been working on, that's transition to the cloud, updating the workflows, moving everything to Python 3, making sure everything is more efficient than when it was than when we started. As anybody who works in a larger facility knows that over time your workflows can kind of get bogged down or change or pass different hands over time, and you continue to make them work, and at some point, if you ever have a chance to kind of reset, it's nice to just kind of clean things up a little bit and get things in a state that everyone's happy with, and as efficient as possible. So we've been looking at doing those things, which requires a few changes in our workflow. The partnership agreements as well, as part of the change of moving to Python 3 and ArcGIS Pro, is making sure that everybody else that we have data handoffs with can process the data we send them. This is mostly a concern related to Pro database features. There are some features within ArcGIS Pro. An easy example of that would be attribute rules that if they exist in the database, when you try and hand it off, it makes the database only accessible, basically a proprietary ArcGIS file geodatabase. So our partners can't work with the data in that fashion, so we have to make sure that there's nothing in there that's causing the data to not be essentially open source. Things like that, just ironing those out, making sure everything is good to get data from you and pass it all the way down to the final point that it needs to be. And so the main engine for that is the 911 toolbox. And so I've been working on updating the 911 toolbox and putting documentation together. And if you want to go to the next slide, Eileen. So with that, we will be releasing at the end of the quarter, after this quarter's submission period, a new toolbox. We're going to keep the same subversion number, but move it up to version 3 because it's no longer in Python 2. But it will be an officially supported ArcGIS Pro Python 3 toolbox. And there are a couple caveats that go along with that. So I will update a final release for Python 2's toolbox version that has a couple small changes that we were planning a toolbox release for related to some bugs and errors in the data model version 3 release that we had. There'll be basically a consecutive release. It's just for the version history inside of GitHub where we host the data. So we'll release the Python 2 toolbox, and then right after that, I'll upload the ArcGIS Pro Python 3 toolbox, just so that version history exists in GitHub, and you'll be able to access it if you need to, or just track any of that past data. The Python 2 toolbox will continue to remain in GitHub. We haven't settled on a format yet in GitHub. It'll probably just be an additional folder. And then the rest of the toolbox will continue to exist as it has before. You won't see any real changes there. The link to download will still be the same, etc. But if you need to access the previous version to use in ArcMap or for whatever other workflows you may have that aren't quite ready to transition to Python 3 or can't transition to Python 3 or whatever the case may be, that'll still be available to you. And lastly, related to that, we do plan to support desktop submissions, data submissions through at least the end of the year, hopefully. There may be some issues where that's not functionally possible, and we'll just handle that kind of as we go along, keep everybody in the loop as needed. Like I touched on before, there are some things that cause data to be only accessible in Pro, and vice versa. And if we run into any hurdles in the processing procedures that make it impossible to continue to do something one way or the other, we will let you know and help you prepare for that if that's a transition you have to make locally. Kind of related to that, not to the toolbox specifically, but related to the 911 data and some of the things that we support here at Desk via use of the 911 data. Along with that transition, we're also moving some of our servers over, and we're looking at, in the coming months, transitioning some of our public geocoders and the 911 geocoders over to a newer enterprise version that no longer supports desktop published geocoders. So there may be some instances if you are using the older desktop geolocators from one of our current on-premise servers. We don't have a current date to shut those off, so they may continue to be available. However, we'll probably migrate the general support over to our new enterprise cloud-based server infrastructure. So at some point, those will potentially be unavailable. So if you are still using them or need to use them, now would be your heads up to start working on a plan to migrate away from those to pro supported locators. But yeah, I think that should cover everything on the locator side. The story map's available. I'll try and push out a big update on that. We'll have some more documentation coming out along with the release of Python 3's version. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I know the last couple of quarters we had some issues with editor tracking. We worked on some various solutions for that. I've talked to a couple people, but generally it's not easily identifiable as one specific solution. If you have run into that, then please reach out to me and we can discuss it some more. And if you haven't, then yeah, congratulations for not having to run into an obscure bug that has to do with submissions. But essentially, we've been able to resolve a lot of it with elevation of security level on the devices, administrator access, etc. for running the program seems to have cleaned up a lot of the problems we were having. Even if you never had the problem previously, that has helped immensely in resolving the problem. So anyway, if you run into a problem where you get an error where it is unable to, the toolbox is unable to disable editor tracking, please reach out to me and we can work through a solution on that, whether it be getting it working locally for you or just submitting as it is, and we'll get it through our system and get you any errors, error reports if you need them. But thankfully, that's been a relatively minor problem, even if it was a pesky, persistent problem. And I think that's all that I have. So thanks for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks, Will. So before we transition to Sherry, any questions for Will? I'll watch the chat here for a second. I love Will's congratulations because is that like a yay or a uh-oh, watch out? It might be, you might hit this. So no, Will does such a great job supporting everyone with, especially with this transition in versions. Not only are we switching from desktop to pro, Python 2 to Python 3, but all of our transition at Dask to move to Azure Cloud. So I talked about the imagery services earlier, but like Will said, soon with that URL change for the portal, so the portal and Will's processes will be moving to the cloud here in the next couple of weeks. So it's definitely a phased approach, and he's put a ton of work into it. So yay, Will, doing a great job, and thanks for the congratulations warnings. We appreciate that. Oh, gosh. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I will go to the next slide. Oops, let's see here, and hand it off to Sherry.
All right, I will run through the stuff kind of quick and then go over the map. So Nina's next NG911 GIS data model is done. It is not released to the public because it has two associated documents. They're called reference documents with Nina. One of them is the GitHub repository where there is actually a template version of the database. And the other one is a reference document that helps deal with IANA registries. So I I learned way more about IANA registries this year than I ever wanted to know. But we do deal with them in the NINA documents just in general, particularly in the I3 document, which is the NG911 call routing technology document, and then in the GIS document that I work on. And making sure those registries, which are used internationally, are properly up to date is a big part of the effort. So those two reference documents are at the very last stage of their approval process, and they will, as soon as we're told those can be published, all three documents will go out. And that will literally, we hope, be in the next week or two. So I've mentioned before that there are some changes in the data model at the national level, particularly the way addresses are parsed and how address information is displayed. And some of it will end up coming back into the Kansas standard. Some of it will end up being stuff that we just can't figure out how to calculate from the data you give us. So we're going to need to probably add a couple of fields or maybe change how a couple of fields work so that we can generate data in this new version 3 standard. But we have some time, and the first step of that is for this document to get published, and then for our GIS group to go through and see what kind of changes we might have to make in the standard. So more to come on that, but if you are interested, I do put on this slide what CLDXF stands for. It is the document that explains how to parse addresses for use in 911 and next generation 911. And if you handle address assignment or address maintenance on a large scale, it's probably worth looking through that document just to become familiar with what the standard is going to become. Another NINA effort that is going on is what is called an REQ, or a requirements document for indoor mapping. It's not a standard. It's not something people have to follow. It's more a bunch of people that are really interested in indoor mapping getting together to say, when a standard is written, these are the things that need to be discussed, and make sure that you don't overlook these important topics. So that work is ongoing. That document will be done and published, or at least done and out for public review well before the end of this year. And hopefully, they were hoping to get it before this summer. So fingers crossed on that. And just making a little bit of an advertisement for NINA. Participation in one of their working groups is open to anyone. You do not have to be a member of NINA. And the obligation is, when that working group is meeting, to attend their weekly meetings, take a look at any contributed text that might be out there, and make comments on it, or to make your own contributions if you like. They do have a few different GIS working groups. They are not all writing standards. Some of them are what are called stewardship groups, where they're writing kind of guideline or best practice documents for how to be a good steward of road data or address data or whatever from a 911 perspective. And certainly every single member of this call has something to add to that discussion if you are interested in participating there. Next slide. So just a quick reminder that the data maintainer training will again be pre-conference at CAM. That is the plan. I will most likely not be there, but Will and Eileen are taking over, and did take over last year a lot of the content, and I think it'll be going just fine. I will sadly probably be working on accounting somewhere, wishing I was talking about something fun like GIS. The FCC note, this was on last quarter's update as well, but I wanted to give you guys an update, so I left it on here. The FCC order 21479 is about telling telephone companies when and how to change how they route their data. The first step is to change it from going through the old selective router equipment to going straight into the new next generation 911 network. We have issued that order. It is called phase 1 from the FCC. We have issued that order, and telephone companies, a lot of phone companies have already done it, but everybody has to do it within 12 months of that notification coming out. The second phase is the one that really impacts GIS, though. And we have not issued the phase 2 order yet. And the phase 2 order, basically translated, means that all the phone companies have to start delivering all of their address information in the CLDXF format. This is why CLDXF matters to V3 of the national data model, and why it will matter to the next version of the Kansas data model that comes out. The CLDXF requirement will be imposed. The way this order works, we, the state 911 board, say, okay, it's time for you to meet the phase 1 requirement, and then big phone companies have 6 months and small phone companies have 12 months to comply. Same thing will happen with phase 2. When we issue the letter that says, okay, we are ready for you to comply with phase 2, they will again have big phone companies 6 months and small phone companies 12 months to change all of their addresses from the common way of formatting addresses that we're all used to the CLDXF method. That's going to be a big change for them. It's going to be a big change for a lot of people. But it provides greater clarity on what the address is, and isn't limited by kind of the systems like the Postal Service system that we have created our addresses to fit into. So basically, it's better at handling those kind of one-off or strange addresses and transmitting them clearly. That phase 2 mandate is still a year or more off, and absolutely how things go with our GIS community here in Kansas will impact when the board issues it. We're not going to surprise this on the phone companies, and we're not going to surprise you guys with it. So just to be aware that it is coming, that there's not an official clock, but it is something that is going to have to continue making progress. And I just saw Sarah Lynn put a note, folks may need to coordinate with CAD and other mapping, and that's exactly right. And it'll be a big stretch for a whole lot of people. I've mentioned some of the changes before, where just like pre-directionals, Northwest 5th Street or whatever, are fully spelled out. So is the street part. That things have to be divided into fields in a very specific way. We've been pretty casual about even in our Kansas standard, how you do things with a couple of different options for maintainers to use. That will change. We'll have to go exactly by the parsing that's in CLDXF to keep things working properly. And that is going to be a big change, like I said, not just for us, but for any company or any application that uses that kind of standard addressing format. And now, just to be clear, when you guys submit addresses or you submit data to us, you do so with those abbreviations and everything, because that's how all of the systems that you deal with work. And then once we get it, we translate it into the fully spelled out versions. So we're already doing part of that translation, and we're not going to pass that on to you unless we just absolutely have to. But we are going to have to pass the parsing on so that we're not making the determination of how the road names should be parsed up. And that's kind of what the GIS group needs to talk through. And then your every quarter reminder that the public safety platform database from AT&T, which is where the telephone records reside, for the most part, your GIS data goes into it without you having to mess with it. And if there are any problems, they're brought to our attention and we either fix it or we communicate with you if it's something that is potentially on your end or that we need your guidance on. But if you need access to that database and do not have it, please let us know and we'll work with AT&T to make sure you get access. I believe that is the last of my slides, so I will take over sharing for just a minute, Eileen.
Okay.
And before I do, I will remind you all that it has been a while since I did GIS, but even at the height of my GIS days, I was never a cartographer, so keep that in mind.
Here comes the black and white map. No.
It has green,
Oh,
thank you.
Got color. Beautiful.
It's got one color.
It's one. That's good.
So this is it. The final award for the first $2 million, or what we suspected was the final award, was made on December 11th. And at that point, it was every single application we had received for a K through 12 school. So a couple of these numbers, these polygons are PSAP boundaries. So for example, this is Neosho County, and that is the Chanute PSAP. So that's why you see a second number in that county. And this 9 over here in Johnson County, you can't see the polygon underneath of it, but it's Leawood. And those are the numbers of facilities that were awarded. Is it directly equal to schools? It is not. Different vendors had different rules about how they kind of group schools together. And particularly, we have a lot of places where, like say the high school and the junior high, or even the elementary school and high school might be in the same building or just right next door to each other on the same campus. And often that counted as just one facility. To the point that there were some places where 6 or 7 schools in a small area counted as one facility. So we actually got quite a few more schools than these numbers indicate. But one more time, please apply as soon as you can convince somebody locally to do that. The PSAP has to be the one that applies, but really all they need is the go ahead from the school and a contact name from them. There is no cost locally except for any ongoing maintenance that they may choose to get into. And it is quite likely that here in the next few days, I will get confirmation that we have another $2 million. So I encourage everybody to apply. I would really hate to have that money sitting there and available to do these maps and just not spend it for want of applications. Yeah, the PSAP applies. So there's a question, the location to apply. The PSAP applies on the NG911 portal. So the same place that that you go to submit GIS data, PSAP administrators and operations managers, when they log into that portal, they have an application, and it is literally a 4-question application. It is who are you? Do you agree to abide by all of the rules? And what school do you want mapped? And you can list up to 50, which you'll notice that we had Sedgwick County go to 57. So when they hit 50 and still had more schools to do, they sent us a spreadsheet. And that's just fine.
I think on that portal page, in addition to the, we ask a few questions like name of the school, address, the contact person. So the PSAPs do kind of have to have that ready to go before you just jump in and start saying, oh, I want to, get these schools mapped. You have to have that agreement in place, and then also that point of contact for the schools before you can submit the application. But it's pretty minimal, really, to get started. So.
Yep. And just to be clear, the agreement is a discussion with the school.
Yes.
We don't require
Right.
a written document or a written agreement of any kind. There is a sample one if PSAPs want to have like an MOU with the school. There is a sample one out there, but it is not required.
Exactly. Yeah, more of a discussion that they know this is happening. They both agree it's a good idea. That
Yeah.
kind of a.
There you go.
Let's see here. Okay, I'm watching the chat in case any other questions come up. So I'll go ahead and show our final slide here, which is really just a wrap up. To remind you that everything we talk about we'll do in our quarterly webinars. The GIS Data Steward training is available on the, I guess I probably need to update that, the 911 Boards learning platform, which works out nicely. Once a new steward comes on board, they can just log in and do that training online. Whereas a maintainer, we prefer to do in person annually at CAM, so we can see you and interact with you. There's the link for the DASC Hub. We try to keep all GIS related information updated there. So if there's ever something that you see is missing from that, we don't have a lot about the critical facilities mapping project at this point because most of the outreach of the project was handled through the board. So once we have some more content to share GIS related to that, we'll put that on the hub. Of course, there's the 911 Boards website. And then at the bottom there, just a reminder, the current portal web address, and then what it'll change to here, and then a couple weeks from now. All right, so with that, look at that. We have 3 minutes left. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone before we wrap up today? All right, well, always feel free to reach out to Sherry, me, Will, even Alan. You can see, I'm glad everyone met Alan, and he'll be joining us from now on. So feel free to reach out to any of us with your questions. And we appreciate you joining us and hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.